our Zoom ground to begin by dedicating the music from our meditation, that lullaby you might have recognized, to my Oma, who sang the song to me at bedtime as a kid. I asked Janet to play it 3 times to honor a version of the song that has been particularly meaningful to me over the last year, where Israeli singer Esther Ofarim sings the song 3 times, once in German, once in English, and once in Hebrew. Mach's gut, Oma. Each of our lives are so rich with lived experience and steeped in memory. During this pandemic, I felt compelled to think long and hard about the impact of financial, racial, social, and spiritual inheritance that I have received, and the kind of legacy I hope to be a part of growing. I want to share how these impact my life and color how I see our faith. I'm going to start with how an inheritance is shaping my life right now. It is not a coincidence that I'm applying to go back to school the same year that my Oma died and left me $20,000. It is a great comfort that a grandparent I love so deeply had a good, long life. But it doesn't stop the hurt. I miss her because I love her. I also feel grateful for the cash she left me and the life-changing choice it provides me. How do I talk about this? If I'm openly happy for the money, will people believe that I'm in some part happy for the death of my loved one? Will they judge choice of what I do with this money as naively generous, foolishly risky, or unforgivably selfish? And will they prove to be right in their judgments? Whether we will ever inherit or be gifted money, and if so, how much and when, varies vastly, but it is rarely discussed in polite company. After years of friendship, someone once revealed that he had received a monthly stipend of $1,000 a week from a family trust since adulthood that had allowed him to work his way to the completion of a PhD without debt. Others will suddenly have enough to buy a car, for a down payment on a home, or to retire a few years early. Those looking in from the outside are rarely concretely aware of intergenerational transfers of wealth, or the slippery boosts from social capital and connections that make choices possible and comparatively safe. This can leave those of us with less advantage feeling inherently inferior and perplexed by why we are unable to achieve the same results. Money is complicated. Talking about money and privilege is uncomfortable and rare, but vital to understanding the complete picture. The experience of being transformed by this gift that I in no way deserve is really something else. Brazen good luck forces us to look at the cold truth. We can often more convincingly justify to ourselves why our efforts, education, intelligence, or skill deserves greater financial reward than that received by the working poor or the unemployed. I believe that we are all devalued and dehumanized anytime we do not honor the inherent right to a meaningful, universal, basic income for all. I don't think we will ever end child poverty or homelessness and much of the violence and environmental degradation in our world that we see until we stop the current pervasive practice of wasting our time and resources trying to weed out the lost causes and the undeserving to help only those we deem to be suffering through no fault of their own, and that we are confident are salvageable. Some intriguing charity models have gone so far as to identify low-income individuals in a community and give them all a life-changing amount of cash with no strings attached to do with whatever they choose. And the outcomes are impressive. It is an all too frequent vicious cycle that those with the deepest needs are so often avoided and abandoned as unredeemable. Instead of receiving money and support to meet their needs, many are stuck in a void where support could have been. Many receive a litany of wounds that then fuel wounded choices. Many start out deep in debt and spend their life and their resources caring for others, often just barely scraping through each moment by the skin of their teeth. Holding the largest lump sum check ever addressed to me in my hands was a dramatic example, illuminating the multitude of gifts I didn't earn. a river of large and small acts of emotional, material, financial, and educational support from others that buoy me up and sweep me along. Life is not a meritocracy. We do not deserve the advantages and hardships that we inherit. Deceiving ourselves into believing that life is fair in order to comfort ourselves or feel deserving of our good fortune is an affront to those who are getting a raw deal that they don't deserve. To fuel the clear sight that compels us to work to make our world a bit better, we need to sit with the truth that we are all, paradoxically, undeserving of our social advantages, and at the same time, all entitled to community of care and support. We may cringe when we hear the line in Amazing Grace about a wretch like me, but this Christian concept of grace is a helpful one from our roots that UUs would be well served to lean into more often, to keep our egos, entitlement, and defensiveness in check, and our hearts humble and open. Perhaps you weren't expecting that a talk on the topic of inheritance would be quite so literal and so crass as to reveal dollar figures. It is tough to break taboos by talking openly about cash. I didn't realize how appropriate this was when I wrote it, but I am running the risk of it resulting in a call from our treasurer to discuss a memorial donation. But just like breaking any other limiting taboo, getting specific about money is also freeing. I feel I would be doing our faith a disservice to preach on inheritance if I neglected our material survival. Cash buys many humans access to our human rights: food, shelter, education. Those of us who have money left over once we meet our basic survival needs face important choices about our responsibilities to justice and equality. Religious liberals know that we can't leave defining family values to social conservatives. So too, we can't afford to let evangelicals own the spiritual power of money. If we deny ourselves opportunities to talk about cash because of discomfort or awkwardness, we do so at the peril of our ability to be a faith that improves the human community. It is common in several more conservative and fundamentalist faiths to practice tithing, where all members are obligated to prove that they give 10% of their income to their faith community. There would be transformational power in us leaning into the idea of UU tithe, which is a concept that recommends we donate the same amount outside of our congregation as we give to our congregation. What if during our annual canvass, we talked to each other about the choices we faced and the decisions we made about the portion of our UU tithe that went to the greater community? I'm inspired by the challenge to action cleverly disguised as a punchline from comedian Henning Wehn, speaking to an English audience. We don't do charity in Germany. We pay taxes. Charity is a failure of government's responsibilities. I welcome a future where, as a society, we expect and succeed at creating governments that are comprehensively meeting the needs of all citizens collectively through government to such an extent that charity is unnecessary. But until then, I'd like us as UUs to think about and talk about financial support within our means for important causes as a moral obligation and not a discretionary expense, both for ourselves as individuals and for our faith communities. What would it look like for us as UUs locally and nationally to put our money where our mouth is on truth, healing, and reconciliation, and commit to find ways to pay our Indigenous land tax, or in Capital's case, our Indigenous rent, in the same way that we pay our municipal property tax? What if we made a commitment that we would donate outside of UU circles 50% of any operational budget surplus? I also want to talk about cash because I want to talk about socioeconomic class and Unitarian Universalism and the fraught intersection of class and race. My experience is that a big part of our inheritance from the history of our UU faith is that UU culture is an overwhelmingly middle class and white culture. Our white middle class UU culture can make church a tricky place to try to have a meaningful conversation about race or working class identity without treating these as novel specimens to be examined and dissected on the receiving end of condescending concern. For close to 2 decades now, I've been trying to wrap my head around how to share in the pulpit what I've learned about middle-class culture from my UU community and what I think working-class culture has to teach our faith. Today is not that sermon. I still feel like I'm not quite there yet. The best I've been able to muster is to continue to chip away at the edges of talking about class culture by sharing personal anecdotes that reveal working-class aspects of my identity. Who knows? Perhaps we'll make some progress together in writing a socioeconomic class sermon during the forum discussion following the service today. What I do want you to hear me say to you today with clarity and conviction is that our UU culture is a white culture and it is a middle class culture. I'm willing to discuss this with you for a long time, but for me, this conclusion is not up for debate. Knowing this about our inheritance is an important step in making the most of our future potential to be a transformative faith. As Black poet and activist Maya Angelou says, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. When we get clearer as you used about seeing and acknowledging the ramifications of the water we swim in and the air we breathe, paradoxically knowing our current specific limitations allows us to work with them and through them to make a great many good things become so much more possible. I want to close by thanking you. We often refer to Capital as a little congregation that could. For those not up on kids' books, this is a reference to the sweet children's classic, The Little Engine That Could, who volunteered, even though they were uncertain of success, to try, to struggle, and persevere to climb over the steep mountain to deliver the toys to the good girls and boys on the other side. Hidden in the slogan, The Little Congregation That Could, is an acknowledgement of all the other ways that things could have turned out for Capital and the UU faith. UUs could have chosen to be the little faith that wouldn't, or the little faith that is too good for that, or the little faith that couldn't be bothered. I get to claim my UU identity today and strive to pass this faith on because of people like us gathered together that continue to work the work of remaining a living faith tradition with transformative power. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.